Hi everyone, welcome back to A Creatively Crafted Life. This is Melanie, and today we are going to be looking at the Spring Market paper pad from Echo Park. I picked this up at Tuesday morning, and this is for all of my card makers out there. While a lot of this would still apply for scrapbooking, I am going to focus this primarily on card making because that's what I see using this paper pad for. So I'm going to walk you through my thought process if I'm going to dedicate a paper pad strictly for card making. I have a slightly different process if I'm focusing on cards versus scrapbooking. Normally, all of my paper kits that I put together, I could go either which way, and I will often plan for a scrapbook layout and then use the scraps to make cards, if that makes sense. But this paper pad for me screams cards, and I am going to show you what I did in this case. So the first thing I did was I took the paper pad apart and I separated the papers into 3 categories. So with this paper pad you get 2 sheets of each. So I have them grouped together, so I've got 2 sheets of each. And I'm going to talk about this first category, which for me I'm considering embellishments. So right away off the bat, normally I consider Project Life cards or cut aparts to be embellishments, right? A lot of times they will create a focal point, they'll create a focal point and already include a sentiment. So these are really simple and easy to convert into cards. So I have 2 sheets of those. The other thing I look for in paper when I'm defining this category, is it easy to cut images out? So is it easy to fussy cut? And when I look at these tags, I automatically see embellishments, right? How easy is it to trim out a tag, use that as a focal point, add a sentiment, and you're done. These have little washi tape strips here. If you can find a sentiment that's small enough, they will fit just perfect in there, and it will look as if you always intended it to be that way. So I have 2 sheets of these. Also for fussy cutting, I look for papers like this one where I can easily trim out either the leaves or the flowers. There's lots of space in between and there's clear delineation between each of the images. So this is a great paper to fussy cut out. This is something I will do if I want to craft, but I don't really want to think. I will turn the TV on and fussy cut these out. This one is another one that I could easily fussy cut out. Now, I'm going to put a little caveat on here. This is a lot of images. A lot. I probably wouldn't do 2 full sheets, but I could easily see me maybe even doing a strip of these, right? Or a single strip and using it as a band across a card, as opposed to individually fussy cutting out each one of these, which you totally could as well. So this is a few different directions that you could take. This also leads me into some other papers which could go either way. Now, by either way, what I'm referring to is they could either be supporting pieces or supporting cardstock or embellishments. Now, this particular pattern, while there is still some really clear delineation between the different images, these are pretty tiny, right? Like if you look at my thumb, let's see, if you look at my thumb compared to one of these flowers, they're pretty delicate. Now, that's not to say that I couldn't use this fussy cut out some of those images in conjunction with this to kind of make a bouquet. Definitely could. But my first instincts when looking on this is too small, and that I would probably use this as a band or a layering piece on my card. This would be very similar as well, although this one the images are slightly bigger, so this one I would probably fussy cut out sooner than this one, but this would also make a really great supporting piece for, or supporting layer for the card. Now let's talk about this one. This one here meets all the criteria of embellishments, right? They're easy to cut out, they're a decent size. I'm not terribly inspired by these images in and of themselves as a focal point for a card. That's just my own personal preference. Like, just to have a stack of pots on a card doesn't scream embellishment I would like to go with. Obviously they have a band here, but that's very similar to that other sheet, and I already have tons of those. Obviously this little picture is super cute, and that might work, and same with the boots. But overall, most of these images in and of themselves I don't find terribly inspiring, and so I would probably use this as a layering piece, or even possibly to make an envelope to send my card in if I wanted to do something a little bit out of the box. This paper here would definitely, in my books, be a layering piece and would not be an embellishment piece. Looking at it, you would think, oh, this would be really great, right? You could trim out a wreath and have that as a focal point. But if you look closely, you'll see that none of the wreaths are independent of each other. They all connect some way or somehow. Like this one here is probably one of the cleanest, but you still have a little bit of a connection here. So you wouldn't get a nice border all the way around this. So you'd either have to cut really close, or you're gonna have to be prepared to have some overlap from the other image. For that reason, this would not work for me for embellishment, and I would use this as a supporting piece. The third category also falls under the realm of supporting papers, but in this case, I am considering these more as solid or base layers, if you will, as opposed to supporting layers. Hope that makes sense. So these tend to be more solid in nature or more monochromatic. So this geometric pattern, for instance, to me reads as a base layer. This text print, even though it has white on black, still to me reads as a base layer. And while this pattern is bold, it is simple in its design, and so would be a base layer. Wood grain, whether it's in scrapbooking or card making, makes a really obvious base layer. Now that I have these sectioned out, the question is, would I break these into page kits like I've done scrapbooking? For me, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense if I'm intending for the whole paper pad to be made into cards. Because all of these can mix and match and I'm going to end up with scraps which I could use on cards, it makes more sense for me to keep these together. What I am going to do though is turn this into a card kit. Okay, I just want to have a little quick chat about fussy cutting. Fussy cutting is where you take an image and you trim it out, you know, quite detailed. I find that it is easier to trim from smaller pieces, so I do a really rough cut and I just trim out flowers and stuff like that into very small shapes so I can trim them out more detailed later on when I have more time. When you have pattern paper, of course, you're going to have some of the images that get cut off. If I think the image is tuckable, meaning I can tuck this component under a layer or something so that you don't see that it's cut off, I will trim it. But if it's something that I think will look odd, like for instance this one here where it's the end of the stem that's cut off, I don't know that I would bother with this because this is going to be hard to tuck when it's the top. Does that make sense? I hope so. This was another example, for instance, where this leaf went off the edge. I probably wouldn't tuck this because this is the end of the leaf, right? So I'm not going to bother with that. And some of these are just too small. Like they're just too little of a bit. I'm not going to bother. So that is my first step, is just to trim these all out. I'll put this in the living room, and when I'm watching TV or chatting with a friend or something, I will work on trimming those out better. I've also taken some of the other papers and trimmed them down a little bit. So this was the one with all the tags, and I trimmed them down to their basic shape. I now just have to go back in and cut them out completely. But you will notice that on this length, this tag here and this one are not a full tag. You could leave them as that. Again, if you're going to tuck it against something, that would work. Or you could trim this image out and use as an embellishment. So this one would be easy to trim out. This one's not too bad, although you would have a little bit of an edge there. So that's the other thing I did. When I trimmed these out, there was a layer of brown in between, and that's what you're seeing here. And basically I just trimmed this to 5.5 and 6.5 inches in length. And these make great little bands on cards. The reason why I did 5.5 is because I will either typically do a 5.5 or smaller card, and then the 6.5 just gives me a little bit more flexibility if I wanted to do, let's say, a 6x6 card or something like that. If all else fails, I can always trim it down to 5.5 or 4.25. For that sheet that had those rows of jars, what I did was I just trimmed them out into strips, and I didn't measure. I just kind of went wherever it made sense to cut. So this one was already off the page, but this one, you know, the strip would have continued on this way, so I just trimmed that off. This gives me the flexibility to trim these down if I want to into individual pieces, or I can leave them as a strip for a card. I only did one sheet. I decided that there was plenty of these and I'm not going to touch the other sheet. The other sheet's just going to go into my stash. So another thing I will do if I know for sure I'm not going to use the paper for cardstock, like meaning for scrapbook layouts, is I will trim the papers down to 6 by 12. That's not to say that if you had leftover pieces you couldn't use it for scrapbooking. Obviously you could. But I usually like to keep my options open. So as I know I'm going to make cards with all of these, I have trimmed these down to 6 by 12. Could I cut them down to say 6 by 6? Probably. But this still gives me the option that if I want to do a 5 by 7 card or a 6 by 6 card, I can do so. But in the meantime, it actually condenses everything so it doesn't take up such a big footprint in my room. If you are going to trim these down, you need to think about orientation. So if you have a pattern that is particular or has to be particularly oriented in one direction, such as this one, you'll want to think about how you want to trim this. Now, because I had two sheets, I've cut this one this way and one this way. And the reason why I did this is because if I want to do a taller card, I now have this going in the right direction. Or if I want to do an horizontal card, I've got enough going this way. Hopefully that makes sense. So all my paper has been trimmed. I've trimmed out all my Project Life cards. I've got all my tags trimmed. I've also punched holes through all of them. Does that necessarily mean I'm going to put some sort of twine or ribbon through all of these? Not necessarily, but I don't think it hurts to have the hole punched, so that's why I went ahead and did it. It's one less tool I'd have to pull out when I eventually go to make these cards, so I like that. I have my little border strips here for embellishments, as well as these borders. And so I will find a smaller Ziploc bag to put these small pieces in, and then a 6 by 12 bag for the whole kit. And in the meantime, I will work on trimming this out and put these in a Ziploc bag as well. I will show you how that all looks. Okay, so now that I have everything pretty much ready except for my fussy cutting, I am just going to take these smaller pieces. I have a little CD bag here that I'm going to throw these in. If you have a small Ziploc bag, that would work as well. So I'm just going to tuck that in here. I'm not too worried if anything hangs out. This is just to hold it in place until I can make these cards. I will grab another one of these for the fussy cutting when I am ready to do that. I have a bag. I must have gotten it in one of my orders or something. It's roughly 9 by 12, not exact, but close enough. And we'll just slide the cardstock in there. It won't zip up, but that's okay. And we'll take these, throw that in the bottom. And for now, this will go on my shelf. If this really bothers me, which sometimes it does, I will take it and just kind of fold it over and apply some washi tape just so it's not flapping in the wind, so to speak. And like I said, these will go in a Ziploc bag as well, or one of those little pockets. Now, could I do more? Absolutely. If you have a plan for the cards that you want to make, and you know exactly what sizes you're going to make and how the layers are going to look and all that kind of stuff, you can trim all your paper down at this point and then just assemble them at some point down the road. Just make sure you include a sketch or something in your kit as well so that you know what your plan was. I've done it where I have pre-cut stuff using dies, you know, like my rectangle dies or circles, that kind of thing. I'm not too sure what direction I'm going to head with these at this point, so I'm just going to leave it at this stage. I've got enough fussy cutting to keep me happy for a little while, so I don't think I need to do anything more with this. When I share with you what I am doing, I hope that this inspires you to think about ways that you are doing things, and while this may not work for you, maybe it will inspire you to do something that will work for you. I hope that makes sense. Anyways, I love having this pretty much ready to go so that when I do feel in the mood to make cards, I can easily pull this out, have all my embellishments and everything together. It's just a matter of figuring out how I want to layer things, cut some bases, and I should be good to go. I am probably going to make this into a card set that I would give as a gift. At least that's my thought right now. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, happy crafting and happy organizing.